Good morning, JMU alum. This is Ed Brantmeier. I'm broadcasting today from Harrisonburg, Virginia. I am part of the leadership team in the Center for Faculty Innovation at James Madison University. I am Assistant Director of Scholarship Programs there, and I am also a faculty member in the Learning Technology and Leadership Education Department at James Madison University as well. And it's my pleasure today to offer you a distance workshop or opportunity to do contemplative practices for self-care. It's a strange time that we live in, and taking care of oneself is of the utmost importance. Talk about some tools for self-care as we move forward today. What is the word contemplative? Really, it's about prolonged thought. So contemplative practices are a little bit different than other things we might do in order to take care of ourselves because they involve reflection. They can be meditative. It's an opportunity for you to have intention and really get lost in thought, right? This idea of getting lost in thought, getting tuned in to the mind. And particularly today, we'll be doing a mindfulness practice, which is really about moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness. There's so much stuff going on at present, and we have to take this opportunity, this moment right here, in order to really be mindful, pay attention to where the thoughts, the body, and the emotions are. So the time has come really to observe the swirl and not get caught up in the swirl. We have so much going on in our lives, in our work life, home life, family life, maybe worry, anxiety, maybe fear. But I would like for you to just in a moment close your eyes, invite you to do that. Close your eyes and just take a deep breath. Take a deep breath with me. So just for a moment, just pay attention to your thoughts. What are your thoughts today? Be a scientist of your own experience. Check in with yourself. How about your emotions? What emotional landscapes are you experiencing today? And I call them landscapes because they come and they go, these emotional landscapes. And doing a check-in with the body. What's going on with the body today? So I encourage you here to be a scientist of your own experience, which really means pay attention, observe patterns, and try to understand landscapes of mind, of emotions, and where the body's at. So I invite you to open your eyes once again. So the time has come. The question here is, how do we observe the swirl of emotions and thoughts that happen amid home quarantine, amid change and uncertainty? Some people are calling it the new normal, but I personally like the new abnormal because there's nothing normal about this. And I'm not quite sure when normality will reemerge, but I don't think it's going to emerge in the same way either. So this idea is that we're swirling, right? We have swirls of anxiety, fear, and we can really get caught up. We're really caught up in the swirl, right? And so the question here is, how do we observe the swirl without getting caught up in the swirl? So I want to share a theory of sustainable peace that came out in an article, a book chapter on sustainable peace for the planet, something that I wrote in the past 2 years as a teacher scholar here at JMU, which really asked the question, well, how do we cultivate sustainable peace, right? How do we cultivate sustainable peace? And as the theory goes, the inner circle, it's about inner sustainable energy. We talk about external sustainable energy with various technologies, wind, solar, etc. But how do we cultivate the inner sustainable energy for the long haul? And what I mean by that is the positive, steady energy that allows us to be in the world uh, well, to perhaps be happy, and also when we encounter difficulty, to navigate that difficulty with positive attitude, leaning into what might become rather than the extreme challenges that could be happening in the moment. So the idea of cultivating inner sustainable energy that ripples into our relations, so then we have relational peace, that influences our inner sustainable energy, also influences how we operate in our institutional roles, how we create and implement policy and practice in order to promote institutional change. And of course, society is comprised of various institutions, right? Schools, businesses, perhaps places of worship, etc., hospitals. So how do we, in our institutional roles, create societal harmony? And then surrounding all that are macro political, economic, social, and environmental forces, which I'm calling education for sustainable development. This idea of sustainable peace for people, planet, and profit. The idea of how do we generate an economy that's viable, but also paying attention to healthy ecosystems as well as social equity concerns. So we zoom from the micro, the inner sustainable energy, to the macro, which is that education for sustainable development framework, people, planet, and profit. One way, I'm calling it a power tool, that I have used to cultivate inner sustainable energy in my Contemplative Leadership for Sustainable Peace course at James Madison University, is to introduce my students to quiet centering. I actually do this in all my courses and have done so for, I don't know, anywhere between 7 and 10 years maybe. My students come to the class. I also work with faculty in the Center for Faculty Innovation. People are busy. They're coming from meetings. They have conflicts. They're thinking about the future, the past. And I ask them, how are we to learn together? How are we to learn together if our minds and our bodies and our emotions are all over the place? And so I say, do you want me to introduce you to a simple tool of quiet centering? It's not mystical or magical. It's simply paying attention. And what I mean by that is, at first, you pay attention to body posture. So paying attention to the placement of the body, the actual posture of the body. And then we pay attention to sounds in the room, in the external room, what's going on around us in terms of sound. Then we go inside the body and do a physical and emotional scan, brief physical and emotional scan of the body. And then we land on the breath as it enters the tip of the nostrils, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, simply breathing, just breathing. So I'm calling it a power tool during this time period because it can be very helpful to settle the emotions, to pay attention to the body, and to understand thought patterns and where they go, and perhaps why they go, and get a grip a little bit. Again, observing this swirl rather than being caught up in the swirl. So we'll do this for about 8 minutes. So I invite you to close your eyes or open your eyes, regardless, have an expansive gaze. You'll hear a bell. So for the moment, I invite you to let all things aside, preoccupations, and simply tune into body posture, paying attention to points of contact with the seat or floor, gravity holding us to the earth, pulling us downward, and also the elongation of the spine, pulling us upward through the roof, to the top of the head. I invite you for a moment to simply pay attention to that alignment, the spinal alignment. You may wish to rock back and forth on your hips just a little bit, finding that sweet spot where the stomach muscles aren't too engaged and the back muscles aren't too engaged. A place of effortless effort. I invite you to roll back the shoulders ever so gently. It increases oxygen flow to and from the lungs, gives vitality to the cells through oxygen. The gift of breathing, simply breathing, the breath of life. And now I invite you to pay attention to the chin. You may rock it up and down just a little bit. And notice how this increases or opens up the space in the vertebrae in the back of the neck. Just finding that sweet spot where you have good communication flow to and from the brain. And of course, the brain is the place of amygdala, the place of fight, flight, or freeze response, and also executive functioning in the prefrontal cortex that allows you to override perhaps feelings of anxiety or worry you might have that undergird your daily experience, or when you turn on the news or television or hear something in social media, how we react. So, this idea of using executive functioning to override fight, flight, or fear response in the amygdala. So, a little neuroscience this morning, today. And so, the invitation is to pay attention to sounds in the room. What sounds are you experiencing in the room? Simply notice. Mindfulness is moment to moment, non judgmental awareness of what is in the here and now. And notice if the mind wanders with the sound, positive, negative, or neutral, and pay attention to that wandering, label it as such, and bring the focus back to sound. Stilling the mind, encouraging it with gentle guidance to pay attention, to be mindful, moment to moment, non judgmental awareness of what is in the here and now. Direct experience. And now the invitation is to go inside the body, doing a body scan. What's going on? Physical sensations today, the emotional landscapes. Simply notice. And again, if you have positive or negative thoughts associated, just pay attention to that and just lean into the direct experience of the physical sensation. Or the emotional sensation. Just lean into it without judgment, moment to moment, non judgmental awareness. Freedom from self limiting, non essential thought. Direct experience. So the invitation now is to pay attention to the breath as it enters the tip of the nostrils, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Simply breathing, just breathing. In this moment, nothing more needs to be done, nothing less than simply breathing, just breathing, simply breathing. If the mind wanders, guide it back to the breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Simply breathing, just breathing. For these few moments, mind is in unison with breath. And allow yourself an opportunity to let all thoughts and emotions and sensations to be insignificant. And what is significant is simply breathing, just breathing, simply breathing. So the mind quietly centered in the breath, in through the nose and out through the mouth, simply breathing, just breathing. In this moment, nothing more needs to be done. Simply breathing, just breathing, simply breathing. And if mind wanders, just bring it back to the breath, in through the nose, out through the mouth, simply breathing, just breathing. Freedom from self-limiting, non-essential thought. In through the nose and out through the mouth. Simply breathing, just breathing. So the bell is an invitation to come back to ordinary awareness, moving the body a little bit, perhaps opening the eyes slowly. So as we discussed, well, as I mentioned in quiet centering, mindfulness is really moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness. And here's a little bit more complex definition. It's a way of paying attention, non-judgmentally. It involves purposely focusing on the experiences of the present moment. So it's contemplative because it's that purposeful and intentional focus on the experience of the present moment. And I invited you to be a scientist of your own experience. So just for a moment here, where are you at now in terms of your thoughts and your emotions and your body? Do you notice a difference at all? Don't judge. I invite you not to judge, positive or negative. But is there a difference in your experience, in your presence of mind, or the qualities of your emotions, or the feelings of the body, the physical sensations of the body? And so one of the things I suggest is to allow all thoughts to be insignificant. And really what I mean by that is for those few precious moments, just simply focusing on the breath. Let everything else fall aside. Thoughts of the past or future, or preoccupations with a sensation or something to come today. So you just allow yourself that freedom. So there are many different ways that one can go about contemplative practices for self-care. This is the tree of contemplative practice. It's through the Association of Contemplative Mind in Higher Education. It's a national and now global organization that brings people together to talk about the potential and power of contemplative practice. If you look at the root of the tree down there, you have communion and connection and awareness. Those are the roots of the tree. And you have different branches, which are different types of practices: stillness, generative, creative, activist, relational, movement, and ritual, cyclical. What we did today was a stillness practice. You could call it quieting the mind or centering. We did that in silence. You could call it meditation as well. But there are also generative practices. Loving kindness meditation, I highly recommend. There's some good taped loving kindness or metta meditations online. There's also beholding or deeply seeing something. And there's also creative practices like music and singing, doing contemplative arts. For some people, painting or drawing or journaling, super important. Photography also can be a creative practice and creative process. And then there's activists, the idea of pilgrimages to social justice sites, vigils and marches, which are a little bit difficult during this time period, but we can volunteer from a distance or volunteer using social distance practices. There are also relational practices, deep listening, really being there for somebody. I invite you to try deep listening next time you talk with somebody. Ask them a question and well, naturally, we typically formulate thoughts in response, but allow that just to go away and really be with the person, hold what they're saying without judgment, without interruption, and allow them to fully express. If we're there for one another through deep listening, it can be very powerful. And then there's movement practices such as dance, yoga, tai chi, hiking is another one, walking, meditation, etc. And then there's ritual or cyclical practices, which are establishing a personal sacred space or retreats. So these are all different forms of contemplative practices for self-care. So the point is here, there are a wide variety of ways to do this, and I would recommend that you look back on times in your life when you had a particular practice that was helpful, or maybe try to explore something new to allow yourself moments of wellness and well-being and connection with your body, your emotions, and your mind. One of the major things I think is very helpful, and I talk with students and faculty about this, is establishing a personal sacred space. It doesn't have to be out there. For some of us are quarantined in our homes right now. We're at stay-at-home context, and so basically, where in our house, in our room, bedroom, whatever, or maybe outside by a tree, where can you establish a personal sacred space, a place where you go to be contemplative, to contemplate, uh, to be calm and relaxed. So establishing that space is particularly important and helpful. And for some of us, it's nature, in nature. There's also movement practices, so nature immersion, walking, tai chi, yoga, biking, jogging, dancing, etc. And these are all really great if we do them with intention and with focus, right? And being mindful of the emotions, the mind, and the body. And one particularly helpful tool is to just be aware before you start something and be aware after you start something, and see what happens. Be a scientist of your own experience. Observe how an intentional experience like walking in nature can really open up your senses and free your mind a little bit and allow you a little bit of space between uh, the chaos of the world and emotions and all that type of stuff. So this is a picture of my two sons, one in the background and one in the foreground here with one of their friends who are going for a hike in the forest. So I also want to encourage you to reach out to local resources. I know some of you may be around the country or around the world, so the JMU Arboretum is not available to you, but walking in a park, if that's possible, or going next to a tree or plants or a pond or water. These are all wonderful practices that can create a sense of well-being. There's a scientific component as well, because trees release chemicals called phenolkilns, and they have a positive impact on the immune system in the body and the mind. We can also go to various places like Shenandoah National Park, Reddish Knob, and again, in your locale, replace that with that place of contemplation, perhaps in nature. There's also several different tools that we can use. Insight Timer meditation app is really great. Headspace, mindfulschools.org. There's a bunch of stuff on YouTube, mindfulness-based stress reduction practices like body scans are particularly helpful if you're having trouble sleeping or if you're a little bit restless. It's a way of really deeply getting into the body and paying attention and allowing ease and wellness to take place. And then I also encourage you to look for local places of worship or contemplation in your faith-based traditions or non-faith-based traditions. It's a time of change, and we need to dig deep and find tools that will help us be well and be happy. And that starts with you. So contemplative practices for self-care, really about intentional practices used to ensure the head is well, the heart is well, and the hands or the body are well. Gandhi and others talked about basic education being an education of the head, the hand, and the heart. And if we can figure out harmony between and among cognition, emotion, and the body, we can live well even amid difficult times. So thank you for listening to this experience, and be well.